Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson.
Hey, badasses. I'm so glad you are here today. I'm glad to be here today. It is rainy, and I think my favorite time to do podcasting is when it's rainy outside, like cozy, and I just have that vibe today. And my guest today, I feel like, is a cozy vibe person. So I'm really excited for you to hear her and her story. And I want to thank you also, because I just want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing with your friends and on your socials. And today's episode is definitely a shareable one because it's a topic that I know women don't have all the information on. And I know that many of the women I work with and that Jasmin works with come in and just don't really have information. And that would be on our menstrual cycle, which we should have information on, and we don't. So this is definitely one of those episodes that if you have those, whoa, like what? Share it with your friends, because I guarantee they will have the same. My guest today is Jasmin. She is the founder and CEO of Holistic Menstrual Health and Fertility Awareness Coaching and co-founder of Mystical Moon Retreats. With her work, Jasmin lays a profound focus on the healing power of embracing one's menstrual cycle and harnessing reproductive hormone knowledge. Jasmin's journey in empowering women begins with a deep understanding of the menstrual cycle and fertility awareness. With her expert coaching, Jasmin helps women not only improve their fertility, but also find relief from often challenging symptoms of PMS. As an almost certified fertility awareness educator, she also teaches women how to safely and effectively avoid or achieve pregnancy without side effects. Through her work with Mystical Moon Retreats, Jasmin offers nourishing gatherings in the local Madison, Wisconsin area that allow women to tap into their intuition, connect with like-minded women, and find their way back to themselves. Jasmin is passionate about body literacy, holistic healing practices, and all things period. Welcome, Jasmin.
Hey, hello.
I'm so glad you are here. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing good. I definitely feel the cozy vibes too. It's a little chillier, but cozy.
Yes, it is. And I can't dress cozy on here because at some point in every podcast, I start sweating. And if I ever wear long sleeves on a podcast, I'm drenched by the end of it because I get just so heated and excited.
I definitely already feel warm too. So that might be, I gotta take this advice to heart.
Yeah, I always wear tank tops. That's why. It's not I'm trying to show off my arms or anything. It's because I sweat profusely. Oh, I'm so glad you are here today. Jasmin and I feel like it's probably been 4 years that we have been connected. I feel like it was in COVID times that we got connected. And I have to say, watching you kind of find your path, you're like this flower and you've just bloomed. And it's really exciting being on the journey and watching kind of from the sidelines. So I'm really glad that you're here today to share your expertise.
Thank you so much. I mean, definitely, I was thinking back to what that was like literally in the middle of COVID. I think everything shut down and then we connected during that first summer. Like, what is happening?
I know.
No, but it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah. So tell us about that journey, who you are, your kind of background and your story, and then, how you landed in this space of menstrual cycle and fertility awareness.
Yeah, I got to take it back a little bit. When I was still living in Switzerland, I was working in the pharmacy and I was working with so many women. They always came in and had all these different PMS symptoms. And I helped obviously for other things too. But I do remember my own cycle at that time was just super heavy, super painful. I just took the pill and I was like moving on with my life and never really paid attention to it whatsoever because it's just there. Why would I focus on something that we're just like burdened with, right? And when I got older and moved to the United States, I had like all these side effects from like birth control. And I started to just look a little closer to what was going on with my cycle and started to see also how exercising affected my cycle and how hormonal birth control affected my cycle. And then I think one day, I don't remember what year it was, but I picked up this book by Alecia Jacobson. It's called In the Flow. And it just opened my eyes in a different way, because all of a sudden I was like, oh, we do have the menstrual cycle, and what is happening here? And that was like my entryway into deep dive into menstrual cycle health. And it just blew me away how little I was taught, but then also knowing all these other women out there that were not taught the same, no matter if I'm from Switzerland or from the United States or from anywhere else in the world, this knowledge was just not really given to us. It's just, yeah, you have your cycle. Maybe you go slightly over it if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's just you in the trenches trying to figure it out yourself. And once I started paying more attention to it, I started to realize my exercise routines were really affected by my menstrual cycle. Tender breasts, like you cannot do jump movements as much anymore, or not as comfortably anymore during this time. Also, I started to feel like my performance was affected as well. And once I connected the menstrual cycle with my performance, once I started to pay attention to that, I was like, holy shit, that was all connected. It felt like my eyes were opened in a different way. And at that time, I was also personal training. So I was connecting with other women that often had similar struggles. And I decided to really go deeper into that, because it just unleashed this power in me. Like, we need to know this. We need to know our bodies, because that will empower us in every aspect of life. Once we work with the cycle, with the hormone changes, we can achieve anything. Like, it's a superpower, like they call it. So that's a little bit of the story.
Yeah. And it totally is a superpower. And I already got hot. Like, first I got full body goosebumps, and then I got like hot. It is such bullshit that there is no education. I remember before I had kids, being in a bar and talking to somebody who had kids. I was like in my early 20s, and I was talking to her about thinking about getting pregnant, things like that. And I was like, I'm not quite sure how to know. And she was the first person in my early 20s to tell me about ovulation. And I had no idea. That's crazy. It's just crazy to me. I forgot about that until today when I was thinking about talking with you. And I was like, yeah, that was the first person. And I'm in a bar in my 20s. Like that, like there should be a different place of education. I mean, I feel like the women's bathroom in a bar in your early 20s is a great place for like hyping you up and everything. But I feel like as far as like menstrual health and fertility awareness and things like that, it should be coming from someplace other than a bar, in some sort of like formal manner of, hey, there are all these women and girls out there. They need to have this information.
If you think about it too, you were 20 or whatever, however old you were in your early 20s, and you already had your period for like, who knows, maybe 10 years, 8 years. The average is like 12 years. Usually women start nowadays a little bit earlier sometimes, but 10 years of you not knowing, and you're already fertile once a month, maybe not like as regular in the beginning, but crazy.
Yeah. Like that's not okay. So that's how you got here. Tell us a little bit about you and give us a little background on your life, who you are.
Well, I already mentioned I grew up in Switzerland. I'm from this really tiny little mountain village with 300 people that live there. And I one day decided I'm going to come to the United States. And first of all, I just thought I'm going to be here for like one semester to learn some English and then go back. But during this time, I met my now husband and ended up staying here longer than I expected. Now I've been here 7 years, and it's been great. I like Madison a lot. I love the mountains. I'm a mountain girl, so I do miss that here. But we have the lakes, which is really pretty as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to jump in. So we've learned about you. We've learned how you arrived here. Given that the majority of women don't really have all of this information like you have, I wish we could take your brain and like map it out. So just give us an overview and what you would think are the best points for women to know, or the best kind of resources, things that they can maybe do, but just, overall general women's cycle information that you think would be really important for the average woman to have.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the first things that was really helpful for me was understanding that the cycle can be broken up into 4 phases. And I like to compare the 4 phases to nature's season because we are closely linked to Mother Nature. And once you learn more about your hormones, you can kind of see the correlations, especially with the different seasons. So I like to start with the menstrual phase, which is the easiest one because it's the time where you're actively bleeding. That is compared to the winter season of Mother Nature. And if you think about winter, if you're in Wisconsin, although this winter was a little bit different, but usually, you're like cozy inside. You don't really like feel like going out, just bundling up, sitting on a couch watching a movie. That's kind of like the energy of the menstrual phase as well. Of course, there's many different women, many different menstruators that have a different experience, and we cannot always stay inside and cozy up as much as we would want to. But the winter phase of the menstrual cycle is very much where all your hormones are at their lowest point. You are releasing what is no longer needed and having that clean slate for that new cycle to, start and go through again. And then after winter, spring is coming, which we're teased with in Madison right now, right? Hot days or warm days. And like, oh, I think it's coming. Oh, cold again. Again, spring is the time when a lot of energy starts rising again. You kind of feel that new sense of renewal because you just had all your old endometrial tissue released. Estrogen is rising, which is your hormone that brings in a lot of energy, especially motivation, and you're often feeling like really good unless you have heavy periods and a lot of blood loss, and might feel a little tiredness during this time. But the follicular phase of the cycle is the springtime that leads up to summer, right? And summer is flirty hot. It's your ovulation time. And fun fact, you are most likely not ovulating on day 14, which is a common myth that, all right, day 14 is ovulation, which is not for everyone. So don't, worry if ovulation comes later or sooner for you. Everyone has a different cycle, and whatever is your normal is usually just fine as well. So ovulation time, our summertime, is a time, again, when we were saying, how you feel in the summer. You're socializing, you're out and about, the days are long, and you're just feeling good most of the time. Some women might start to feel some symptoms like one-sided cramping or maybe some aches and pains from the ovulation process.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because that was one thing that I was like, oh, so can you talk about the one-sided, like what is actually happening there?
Yeah. So I just learned that with my fertility awareness training too, that, that one-sided pain, often I thought that was the release of the egg. And sometimes that might be true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the active release of the egg. It can also just be the stretching of the follicle. So, that tension that starts to build up until that egg is being released, because it literally bursts out of the follicle in your ovary, which is a pretty violent process if you think about it. But it can also be the ovary shifting in your body, like moving closer to the fallopian tube that is actively like taking up the egg once it is released, and then hopefully being fertilized, which is the whole reason why we have a menstrual cycle, right? To hopefully reproduce and fall pregnant. So again, that side pain can be many different things. It can also be the egg might just be released and there is some fluid leaking in your pelvic cavity, which then cause some irritation and maybe some pain as well. So again, that pain does not necessarily mean it is happening right now. It can be, but we would only really know for sure if we would do an ultrasound, if the egg is being released at this point, which is not really, we're not going to the doctor just for that now.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Because I know that is something that I experience and other women have, but they don't really have any idea what's actually happening inside them. Thank you.
Yeah. And it can switch from side to side too, right? Some month you have on the right side, left side, or just 2 months on one side and whatnot. But yeah, summertime, ovulation time. And then we are moving into the fall season, which is the luteal phase of your cycle. So from ovulation until the first day of your bleed, it's the luteal phase, your personal fall. And that is often a more challenging time for women if they have PMS symptoms, because that is the time when PMS symptoms usually start showing up closer to your period. There's definitely many things, and that's what my work all entails, that we can do to make this fall season of your life a little bit easier through like nutrition, exercise, routine, stress management, specifically targeted to your menstrual cycle. But your fall season, if you also look at Mother Nature, right? Like harvest time, and all of a sudden we're starting to kind of get more quiet, birds are leaving, leaves are falling, like the whole energy is starting to cozy up again. And then I read in this book the other day that during the luteal phase, it's really when the tide is out and everything that is exposed from the ocean ground is just there for you to see. So sometimes that can be challenging because all the shit that shows up that you might not know that it is actually there, because during the other times of your cycle, the water is over it, right? And it's all pretty. But all of a sudden the tide is out and you're looking at all the muck and all the exposed things, and all these emotions start showing up, right? Like sadness, rage or anger or resentment, grief, all these different emotions can come up. And they often point us towards underlying needs that are not met, or emotions that have been suppressed or not worked with, that just show us really like, okay, where are areas in our lives where some change might need to happen, or where we should just pay more attention, maybe nurture some areas that are still wounded. So I really like this analogy, like the tide is out, everything is exposed, you're just looking at it.
That is really neat. And like, I think a really great learning opportunity for women, because when I was younger, that phase leading up to my period was different. I experienced different things. And as I've gotten older, it has shifted also. So I think that's a really neat opportunity for women during that time to, you know, maybe keep a journal or something like what is exposed right now? What am I feeling? Because yeah, that's a really neat analogy. I like that.
Yeah, I really like it too, because it just shows us too, we are not crazy for feeling emotional or more, you know, sensitive during this time too, because our hormones are shifting during this time. Our body is actively in its fall season. So, you know, the whole energy is already different. If you just think about Mother Nature too, how do you feel in the fall, right? You're not as outgoing maybe anymore. Maybe you're just like, oh, we're doing a couple of cozy things. But nature is slowing down, and that is our body's way of showing too. Maybe your to-do lists are like crazy through the roof, and you're just going and going and going, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, why can I not keep up with this? Like working out, right? I mean, that was your life for a very long time too. Like you probably saw it many times. I cannot push myself the way I did 2 weeks ago or last week. What is going on? And you just start beating yourself up without even knowing that that is actually a very normal thing to happen, because you are in that fall season of your menstrual cycle. So I think starting to pay attention to that can be so empowering just in and of itself. Even just understanding, hey, now is the time when the tide is out, right? Everything is exposed. I have a lot of things that come up. It's a way of our body telling us too, hey, look at me, look inside, what is going on? And allowing yourself to maybe take a couple minutes to also look and maybe journal about it if that's what you like to do, or talk with a friend, or whatever is your way of handling things that might come up. It can be very healing. And there's a big correlation too with the whole PMS symptoms and all the stuff that is coming up in that time as well, because there's always a link. I do believe there's definitely a link between all the emotions and symptoms that we experience.
Yeah, that's just really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I know that for me personally, I've gotten mostly under control, air quotes, that, you know, week leading up. But there are some times where, like this last time, I was like on empty, and my husband, I think, is a little bit terrified during that time. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. Like, one, you're not crazy. Your hormones are shifting. But this last time for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this way in so long. I was irritable. And it kind of took me by surprise, because I'd really just honed in and got it under control. And by under control, I mean, you know, my supplements, my nutrition, all of the things that I was doing. And I reflected back and I was like, oh, I've been under a bit more stress lately. I have had these things that have shifted, just the subtle practices that I have. And I didn't even really realize it until I was in that phase and I was losing my shit. And I was like, oh, that's what happened. So can you go into that a little bit about the things that are really supportive? I know it changes through each phase, but just a few of the things that are really supportive for women who maybe experience those higher PMS symptoms and have that sort of, I feel crazy feeling. Just maybe some resources, which I know you are definitely a great resource, but maybe nutritionally and some things that are happening that they can tweak a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, there's so many different avenues that you can go down to supporting, especially that time before your period bleeds, so that fall season that we were just talking about. If you're listening, I would love for you to just take a moment and sit down and see, are you more like an emotional person that there's a lot of emotions coming up, or is there a lot of symptoms, like physical symptoms like cramping or, like headaches, sleep issues? What are the things that are showing up? First, I always say, like, let's look at the symptoms, right? Like, let's track those. Do they show up every month? Because if it's just once in a while, like how you were saying this month was a little harder for you, it can, there can be off months because there's a lot of things that are going on in our lives and they affect us very, very much so with our cycle. But maybe you have a couple things and you're like, they always show up. Take note of that. And then we can go deeper, right? If it's more the emotional side of things, maybe we need to focus on, getting into that like rest state of things, addressing maybe the underlying trauma things that are coming up. And that will best be with obviously a therapist. I'm not a therapist, but I do see that talking through those types of things can get you very far. But if it's more like the symptoms like cramping or tender breasts, those types of things, there's definitely nutritionally a lot of things that we can do, because in the fall season of your cycle, if you think about the way you feel in the actual fall season during the year, it's a time when you're usually eating more like soups and like warming foods, right? Maybe you're craving a salad, but for a lot of women, warming foods can be very nourishing during this time. Keeping your feet warm has a huge impact, because in traditional Chinese medicine, they say if your feet are cold, your uterus is cold. So that can also intensify cramping if that is something that you experience. So maybe it's warm liquids, warm tea. There's also herbs that can be really nice depending on the different symptoms, of course. But I do love like a ginger tea during this time. If it's obviously like super hot out and you're like, I am sweating, I don't want to like eat soup and drink hot tea, there's different ways. Maybe you make a ginger lemonade that I love to do, especially in the summer. It's really refreshing. Just like those more warming spices, maybe incorporated too. We got turmeric and cumin, cinnamon, like those. You can even look them up on Google, like what are warming spices? And I'm sure you'll find like many others that are really nice to cook with or add to your dressing or make tea out of. Those can be really nice in that fall season of the cycle. Just always think about Mother Nature, because we are so closely related. How can we nourish to prepare? An interesting fact too, a lot of women have, especially if you have bloating and those like digestive issues that show up cyclically, a lot of women have a harder time breaking down like raw vegetables, raw fruit. So they have an easier time if they start, like just during this time, maybe have some cooked vegetables instead, helping the digestion because your body is ramping up for your period. It's just little things that you can start to explore and also tweak and see, hey, what is feeling good right now? Tune in with yourself. And again, see what shows up every month. And maybe again, there might be things that just show up once in a while. And you're like, okay, it's clearly because my kids are just crazy right now. And I haven't really slept well.
Yeah. And those things really do have an impact, as I noticed, last month also. You've mentioned several times the exercise paired with your cycle and kind of related to the seasons and things like that. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. My personal experience too with the cycle, that on certain times I was not able to push myself the way I thought I have to push myself. And I think a lot of fitness advice that we see online is very much so that no pain, no gain. You got to go hard every day, like that go big or go home.
Even you saying push yourself is like, I used to push that stuff. Like I was a big, just do it until you puke. And now I'm like, I wish I could go back and just shake myself. I mean, I did the best that I knew at the time. But now the idea of, I mean, you can push yourself, but there's different thresholds for that within your cycle. And I definitely am not a pusher when I shouldn't be a pusher anymore.
You know, we're definitely not saying, right, like don't push yourself, because there's definitely a difference between like, I'm just lazy and I don't want to work out versus like, hey, I'm actually I just cannot physically like run as far as I did like last week, or, you know, there's very much a difference between that. But the whole push yourself mentality and then always having to do like these HIIT workouts and, you know, burn calories and restriction and all, you know, the whole fitness, I feel like body feelings when I talk about this, because I was very much also ingrained in this culture when I was younger, and it really affected my hormones thinking back tremendously. Like my cycle became very irregular. But with all that being said, that there is advice online to like sync your cycle with every different season having different types of workouts, which I personally feel like is not very applicable to a lot of women's life. Not everyone wants to switch workouts like that every like week. But it can also just, the routine that you have right now, let's say you're weightlifting in the gym. If you're in your menstrual phase, it's okay to also, if you have a lot of women have like heavier periods the first 2-3 days. If you're like really heavy and you're like cramping and you're just like not feeling physically like good and strong, it's okay to also take a day off. It's okay to just do some stretches at home if you want to move your body. If you feel like, hey, my period is not bugging me as much, like I feel strong and like actually really capable of, I don't want to say push yourself, because again, this can be like taken in a different way, but you can definitely go to the gym. Like you can definitely lift weights. There's no need to just rest and relax the whole time. But if you're someone that struggles with a lot of symptoms during this time, it's okay to take a day or two off. You're not going to lose your gains. And
it's okay to take a day off. Write that down. We're going to subliminally like rest, go rest.
Put down those weights. No. Or go for a walk, you know, if it's like nice out, take a walk. It doesn't always have to be this crazy workout routine. A lot of women find it easier during their follicular phase to push themselves, like in the sense of like, hey, my energy is back. Estrogen is supporting me. I'm able, like, I want to go run. I feel good. Symptoms are usually disappear by that time for a lot of women. So they feel like I'm ready to do the HIIT workouts or like lift heavy or hit some PRs. Definitely like go for it. Also like leading up to ovulation, it really is so individual too, because if you have those like one-sided pain during ovulation, or you feel like really like bloated and puffy during this time because of the ovulation process, maybe you have to like adjust your workouts a little bit. Maybe take lighter weights that time. If you're like cramping, if we're cramping and in pain, like let's not also add more pain with our muscles being super sore. But then especially pay attention in the luteal phase. Usually the luteal phase is ideally between 12 and 14 days long. So it's a pretty long period of time. In the first week-ish, women usually don't have as many PMS symptoms yet. So they're still able to lift weights, if we're talking about weightlifting, do all their normal like routine things. The last like 5 to 7 days right before your period are usually like prime time PMS time, if you experience those. And the thing with working out, obviously it is a stressor to our body, our muscles, right? That's the whole way of getting stronger. It's like we got to challenge our muscles. They're going to break down, adapt, and become stronger. That whole process, the whole stress on the body can often, if we're going overboard with it, it can often cause more PMS symptoms in the long run, or even short run. Like if you're overdoing it and you already have some like cramping going on, it can oftentimes exacerbate. So during that time, we're more sensitive to stress. So let's look at our workout routine to like not also put more stress on our body during this time. So if that could mean like lighter weights, maybe less reps, just let's not take this time to hit new personal fitness goals and just allow our body to take it a little bit easier, adjust it in that sense, depending on your body. And I obviously work more closely with each individual if they come work with me and we're like adjusting that, whatever they're doing at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. To their personal. I do recognize that most people, especially because there's probably like different gyms for different things. So you're not necessarily going to have 4 different programs, but could you give an overview if life worked that way about what the ideal time for each exercise for each cycle, like what would that look like if you were using your phases and doing exercise that was really supportive and nourishing for each cycle? Like when would be a good time for like a restorative yoga? When would be a good time for a HIIT class or, things like that. So sort of like where the energy flows with the workouts and kind of give us a picture with your cycle.
So if we're talking about HIIT workouts, right? Follicular phase, like spring, summertime, even like towards the end of your period, when that energy starts rising, HIIT workouts can be well tolerated during this time. I personally feel that really well with my body. I'm like ready to go hard and I'm like, I want to like sweat and just feel energized by it. I always say to women too, you can, whatever you're doing, whatever workout you're doing, see how you feel afterwards. If you feel good and energized, then that was probably a really good workout during this time for you. If you feel even more depleted than before and you're like, I am not, like I have to take it slow for the rest of the day, that was probably a little bit overboard. So, a restorative yoga class that you were just saying is great when you're like leading up to that menstrual phase, that PMS time, because restorative yoga is still a great workout, but it's not as strenuous as like a HIIT workout or a really heavy weightlifting session. Or if you're someone that runs, right? Take the time to like run further or do sprints and all those when you're in your follicular phase, ovulation time. During this time, you're going to be able to accomplish those a lot easier and you're going to feel a lot better than if you try to do those types of workouts right before your period and you're like, oh my gosh, I did not run as far or I just can't.
Yeah. And then you get down on yourself. I hear that all the time where women will then beat themselves up because they didn't do like the same pace or they couldn't go the distance and things like that. So yeah, good point.
It's such a big relief when we learn like, hey, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
It's very much part of my anatomy and my body's function that is affecting those different aspects of my life, like working out or, whatever else you're doing in your life. But it's definitely eye-opening to understand, hey, this is a normal part. Like I'm more emotional and moody right now because how you were saying with your husband last month, my husband had to remind me too, because I was like, I am gaining weight and I'm working out and doing all these things. He's like, what phase of your cycle are you in? And I was like, you're right. I'm like beating myself up. But I also know that during my luteal phase, the fall season, I know that I retain more water. And obviously I'm going to be feeling heavier or like puffier during this time because it is a natural process with our hormones. So it is, cut yourself some slack. You're probably in your luteal phase if you're beating yourself up.
Right?
You're probably in your luteal phase.
Well, and speaking of husbands, I think mine said something just this last week. So my birthday is coming up in a few months and we're planning a getaway. And he says to me, and this is my advice for all of you, learn it yourself and then teach it. He says to me, he goes, by my calculations, and he might have been joking, by my calculations, you will be ovulating during this time. So we are safe. That is something to consider, which when I started down this path and learning about my cycle and how it impacts me and, kind of my whole life is where are you in your cycle when you're planning these sort of big events? So first of all, just keep track of your cycle, however you decide to do that, but noticing, how you're feeling in your cycle. And then when you have events where you have some control over when they're going to be, checking with your cycle to see, because when you are experiencing those heavier PMS symptoms, that might not be a good time to say, have family photos taken, take a vacation, do a big presentation, because you might be irritated as hell. And then you have to go put on this like smiley face. No, that doesn't work very well. So, noticing how symptoms show up for you over the course of your cycle and kind of doing some life planning, just like we talked about the fitness, like doing some life planning around that can be really helpful. And then bring your partner on board with the education, because I think it can, then they know like, oh, this is how you're feeling right now. And how can I show up for you versus just thinking you've just gone bananas.
Definitely. Guess what phase I'm in when I scheduled this podcast?
Oh, when?
Today. Follicular
yes.
phase.
So you because I gave you a bunch of dates. So you're saying
yes.
you check that.
I knew I'm going to be leading up to ovulation, and I'm like, I will feel good. I will feel confident, and I will not be PMSing or not be like cranky and don't want to talk. Not that, I would obviously do fine, but if I can schedule it, right? If it's my choice to choose a date, why not optimize my personal time with this sort of thing?
Yes, because you're just working in the flow then. And it takes so much less energy and effort to do things when you work with the flow of your cycle versus not having the information and planning things when it's not the optimal time.
I want to quickly give an example with one of my clients. She has PMDD, which is an intensified version of PMS symptoms. So a lot of emotional symptoms are amplified for women that suffer with PMDD. So they experience, it's basically like PMS on steroids, they sometimes call it. So for her, it was really helpful when in her luteal phase, she knew that time was really intense for her. And she knew that this time was very challenging for her family as well, because she was, having a lot of emotions that showed up, and she had less patience and understanding for other people because she had to deal with all the other things that are coming, right? The tide is out. She had to deal with all that was coming up for her. But for her, it really helped. She knew, okay, I am in my follicular phase right now. I know in about a week-ish, my time will start when PMDD or those symptoms are showing up. So she is able to now plan ahead and be like talking with her husband, hey, this time is coming next week. What can we do to prepare for this time so it is easier on all of us? And then he can step in, in different ways that he might not do during the follicular phase, but he might be able to, hey, let's take the kids to grandma for the night, or let me go grocery shopping, or, whatever helps in your situation, in your life. It can help so much to understand your body that way. And then everyone is having a great time, right? If mama is good, everyone else is feeling good. And especially will make her time a little easier too, because she can take some time off and not have like millions of to-dos if she can just take a couple of things away from it. So that is very helpful, even if you don't have PMDD. If just know, hey, this time is going to be more challenging. Maybe I'm going to socialize with my friend another time, or maybe I'm going to ask my husband to help with XYZ.
Absolutely. Such a good example of where having this information and keeping track of your cycle gives you so much power. Because what I see so often, and you probably see this when you start working with women, is that if they're not tracking, all of a sudden they get their period and they're like, oh, now I understand why yesterday and the day before or whatever was just like, I was crying, or, the tide is out, you see everything. And they have no awareness until bam, they get their period. You can set yourself up and you feel so much better and empowered, and it then creates harmony in your home and harmony in your life. So keeping track and having like you for support and planning, how can we work through this phase? I mean, that's huge.
Huge. And then just imagine too, right? Then you have more time for yourself to fill your own cup in whatever capacity that you feel comfortable in doing. Maybe you're just taking a nap. Maybe you're going on a walk alone. Then it's very individual, of course, but it can free up so much more space for you to feel seen and heard. And also, it's okay to ask for help. We're always, I love like power women and like, empowering them to like, you can achieve anything you want, but it's okay to also say, I need to take a step back. And that is totally okay, because I will feel better in the long run instead of now pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you're left like so depleted and angry at the world. Just like, I want to scream.
Yeah. And we don't want to live that way. Yeah, we don't want you living that way. So, real quick, I know we're kind of nearing the end, but there are a lot of women who are on certain kinds of IUDs, birth control, where they don't actually get a cycle. Many people that I know have that. What information do you have for them as far as working with their cycle? Because there are ways that you can do it, but many of them I know are kind of unaware because they don't actually have the bleed.
Right. I mean, definitely, I would say see the same thing, like write down your symptoms that show up for you, because some women still get PMS type symptoms even leading up to their withdrawal bleed. So you don't actually have a real period on like hormonal birth control, but first write down what symptoms show up on a regular. Maybe you track a month or two, maybe 3 ideally, just to see what shows up. And then you can still apply what we were talking about today. Okay, maybe that time when you know, like next week is my withdrawal bleed, plan ahead too. Like maybe we're going to slow down a little bit right now. Treat it like a little bit like the luteal phase, I would say, that leading up to your period. Otherwise, of course, with the hormones, you're pretty stable in quote unquote when it comes to your hormones, because they're not shifting as drastically as if you're not on hormonal birth control. But you can very much still take this advice and apply it, because I think a lot of us women can, it's nice to hear like you're allowed to rest and ask for help and adjust your lifestyle to the way that makes you feel good and you feel, nourished and empowered. And it definitely, of course, with the hormonal birth control, there can also be symptoms that show up because of hormonal birth control, but it helps to take a look at what shows up. Maybe it is related to the pill. Maybe it is not related to the pill. I would say definitely take a closer look what shows up and then go from there.
Okay. Thanks. I think the big theme here is really dropping into noticing how are you feeling, really paying attention to your body, because your body gives you so much information. And to absorb that information, you have to pause a second, slow down a little bit, and actually pay attention. So the opposite of that pushing through we talked about, and, take a look. And it's okay to do that, because it will give you so much information that you will be able to work with. And then here's the cool part is you can actually operate at a higher level because you are working with the natural flow and cycle of your body.
Totally.
So it's like you said, superpower.
Because then when your time comes to shine, like in your follicular phase, you're able to actually go for it, because you're like, I'm replenished and ready.
Yeah. And pay attention to that too, because that's one thing for me. I don't know why this is the most bizarre thing, and it shifted, but now I am more excited, like camera ready like this during my menstrual cycle, right in the day 2, 3, and not in when I generally am ovulating. Usually that's where I'm tired and I have a lot of pain and things like that, but it wasn't always that way. And I have had to sort of adjust, but it is because I'm also paying attention. I'm not just expecting it to be a certain way because that's the norm. So it really is so valuable to really pay attention to the information your body is giving you.
That's why individuality is so important, right? It's not going to be the same for everyone. And that's a big focus in my work. What is going on with you, and not with, because they are experiencing the same, you're supposed to experience the same too.
Yes. And I'm sure you see that. I know one of the things I see a lot is when women come to me with health coaching, they have followed people on social media and they think it's it's really deprogramming, because they think it's a one size fits all. And that is the great thing about working with someone like you, is you are looking at their body, their cycle, all the things that they are experiencing, and, their goals. What is it that they want?
Right.
You have such an advantage when getting someone on your team to work with you, someone with the expertise, and just serve you, because that's really what you're doing. You're serving them and creating such a, really is a better experience in life for them.
Yeah. Again, taking into account their goals, I think that is huge, because not everyone wants to, run a marathon or whatever they want to achieve.
What I see is generally women just want to feel normal, generally leading up to their bleed. They're just like this, I feel so out of control. and just not like myself. And then some people, you know, that some women I've talked to, it's like they only feel good 2 weeks a month. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
You should not only feel good 1 to 2 weeks out of the month. So connecting with Jasmin, I think if we're describing you and you only feel good 1 to 2 weeks of the month, that is not acceptable. And that is not a way to be going through your life. So getting, you know, Jasmin on your care team, like your support, I call it my pit crew.
Nice.
That is just so helpful because you need a good pit crew. You need people in your world that you are the expert and you can help me, because you don't ever lose that knowledge then. You know, once you work with somebody, they take that for, I mean, you could have that for 20 years and feel 20, 30 years, depending on how long it is until you go into menopause. Like that is a long freaking time to feel like shit. And you don't want to feel like shit. Like you all deserve to feel so good and maximize all of your time and do all the things that bring you joy.
Life is short. Why not start to feel good right now and end up having such an easier transition into menopause anyways, if we're doing this kind of work?
I tell people all the time, if I could go back to when I first started, I would go into women's health, like the perimenopause, and I would like go deep, deep, deep into it. I have surface level information I can point people, but there's not enough resources out there to support women in that time because our medical system is not set up for that. And that's the thing. So if you're going to I just want to point this out, doctors and, you know, all of the medical field, it has its purpose and it is there. It is good. It can be life-saving, all of the things. But if you are experiencing any sort of menstrual women's health issues, you need someone like Jasmin, because unfortunately the medical community is not in any way educated in actual women's health. This is where I start sweating. I've already sweated once. This is where it starts again. But you really need to get somebody whose focus is women's health, because unfortunately we are not top on the radar of anyone in the healthcare system.
And unfortunately it's also normalized, like, oh, PMS is normal, right? Cramping is normal. It's just what women have to go through. It's just you have a uterus, it's normal. And I'm like, no, we cannot, like, we want to feel good, and it's okay, you know, if we have some symptoms, but like it's the norm, but it's not that we have to accept it and just struggle forever. Again, life is long and short in the same sense, but that's a lot of years of struggle, and your doctor that has 10 minutes with you is not going to be able to dig deeper and see, okay, what is the tide showing us?
And they won't dig deeper with you. They absolutely won't.
No.
I've never worked with a woman that was like, yeah, I had such a good experience when I went in for my women's health issue. This is what, like, I have zero of all the women in the last 13 years have ever said, yeah, I had a great experience. No, usually they're dismissed. It's like, here, take birth control. And there's the door. So they're like, they have their role, they have their thing. Women's health, unfortunately, is not. And it's not normal. My acupuncturist says that women should have an asymptomatic period. Granted, you might have a different, but the idea is you do not have to have all of these symptoms, that you can work with your body and, you know, balance them out and kind of equalize your system.
Yes. PMS is not normal.
No. We should have started with that. Like, PMS is not normal.
It's your body's way, like your body shows symptoms for a reason. There's an underlying reason why your body is showing you symptoms, and your body is saying, hey, look at me, pay attention to me. Yeah.
Yes. Which is why when I had, you know, the more symptoms this last time, I was like, okay, something was awry. Like, let me do some reflection here. Let me look at my nutrition. Let me look at my sleep. And then there was a lot of things where I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So just the awareness.
It's a great way to check in.
Yes. All right. We are going to wrap this up. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, what resources do you had mentioned the book. Is it, so will you say again what book that was?
Oh, Alecia Jacobson, In the Flow. I personally, again, that one is very extreme into like each different phase, do this, and this. But it can definitely be a great eye-opener for you. I also love the book Period Repair Manual by Laura Bryden.
Okay.
This one is really good. I also have resources, obviously, on my social media. feel free to email me. I offer free 30-minute consultations to get to know me or see if we're a good fit with the symptoms that you're experiencing. I do have a free Getting Off Birth Control ebook if that is any of your interest. And of course, if you want to look at natural birth control options, I teach that as well. Whole topic for a whole other podcast, but definitely reach out. I'm happy to give more specific resources to if you're like, do you have something specific for PMDD or endometriosis or whatever.
Endometriosis. Talk about another topic. Okay. So, and all of those to get in touch with Jasmin will all be in the show notes. So you will be able to just click a link and connect with her and follow her on her socials. And we will also link that free resource that she has if you are interested. All right. Last question. Share with us a life hack that saves time, energy, or resources.
Honestly, track your cycle.
I knew that was coming.
Because it will save you so much heartache, so much frustration. And it's just going to be like you and your body are shaking hands because you're like, we're working together. We're not against each other.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
So that's my life hack, honestly.
Yes. And it truly is. I mean, it really, truly is. Okay. Yeah. All right, Jasmin, thank you so much. I had the optimal amount of sweat in a podcast. So I was equally like intrigued by your information and pissed off about just all the things, which is my markers for like success. So thank you for sharing your gift. And to anyone listening, if this is something that you were just like, holy shit, I had no idea. Please share this because there are too many women out there that also just don't have this information. And like Jasmin's life hack, this information is power. And by, the more information you have on this, the more power and the easier your life gets because you are able to tap into that superpower and work with it. And you can reach out to Jasmin. We'll have all her stuff linked and you can connect with her. And I know her social media feed is like complete fire and she has the most fantastic information available for you of things that you never would have known to expect and things that you maybe experience and just kind of brushed off. And she talks about everything. So definitely give her a follow.
I would say there's no TMI in my world.
No, and there can't be TMI because people don't say things because they're like a little shame about it. And then you don't have the information. So let's get rid of TMI also.
Yes. Let's talk about bodies and periods and
all the things. I know. I really went deep on, oh God, I was going to say, I really went deep on your discharge. That is so inappropriate. On your discharge, your post about discharge. I went. Okay. All right. All right, Jasmin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.